1743. Great Britain, not wanting to allow the strengthening of France so far from the beginning of the war, gave Austria monetary subsidies, and this year decides to take a more active part in the war. A 43,000-strong army was assembled in Flanders under the command of English King George II, preparing for an attack on France. Exposed against the Pragmatic army, the French army of Marshal Ney was defeated on June 27th near the Dettingen and forced to move beyond the Rhine. The winners reached all the way to Worms, after which Sardinia and Saxony, bribed by English money, joined the alliance with Austria. In the spring of 1744, France officially declares war to Great Britain, Hanover, and Austria. On May 22nd of the same year was proclaimed the Frankfurt Union between the Emperor, Bavaria, and Prussia, and was supported by France. The purpose of the union was to support the Emperor and the integrity of Holy Roman Empire. The master plan was outlined as follows. The French had to resist the Pragmatic army, as well as divert part of the Austrian troops to the Netherlands, and Prussia had to invade Bohemia and defeat the remaining Austrian army. In Britain, King George II also declares war to France. The main reasons for the outbreak of hostilities were the help of the French ships to the Spaniards during its war with England, the support of Jacobites, adherent of exiled English king and his descendants. The main reason, France was declared a violator of the balance of power in Europe and in the aggressive expansion of its influence. The Prime Minister stood for the creation of a broad anti-French coalition with the participation of Russia to distract Prussia from this conflict, which would allow Austria to focus on the war with France. But there was too much criticism against this plan, accusing the Prime Minister of wanting to ignite a world war out of this conflict. Again, there was a change of Prime Minister, and with the involvement of the new one, the Treaty of Warsaw is signed between Great Britain, Dutch Republic, Habsburg Monarchy, and Saxony to uphold the Pragmatic sanction and Maria Theresa's candidacy for the throne of Austria. During the summer, the French gained a series of victories in the Netherlands, but at the same time, the Austrian army crossed the Rhine and in its turn inflicted several defeats in Alsace on the other French army. In the north, the French equipped an army of 15,000 people, which was supposed to be transferred under the cover of the fleet and across the English Channel with a pretender to the English throne, Charles Edward Stuart. But the expedition was destroyed by English fleet and storms. On August 23, 1744, 70,000 Prussians entered Bohemia without declaring war, which was the beginning of the Second Silesian War. In Silesia, Frederick left 17,000 troops as a barrier against Saxony, and September 16, he captured Prague. Maria Theresa was completely unprepared for an expected offensive. Only 15,000 troops were within Bohemia. The nearest reinforcements were gathered in Hungary, while the main army crossed the Rhine to join the Allies in Flanders. Frederick moved on with the aim of drawing the Austrians over, but the United Austrian army, by constant maneuvers, avoided a general battle. But because of the dysentery epidemic, the extreme shortage of provisions, and the necessity for rehabilitation, forced Frederick to return to Silesia. The Austrian army was able to return almost whole Bohemia under its control. At that moment, an event occurred that mixed the plans of both coalitions. On January 20, 1745, Emperor Charles VII died. His son, the Bavarian Elector Maximilian III, inherited the country, which turned out to be ravaged from the war, decided to forget about the claims of his father and made a separate peace with Austria, according to which he renounced all claims to the imperial throne, in return for which he received back all the areas conquered by the Austrians during the war. The husband of Maria Theresa, Francis Stephen, was elected as the new emperor of Holy Roman Empire under the name of Francis I. He was recognized by all electors except Frederick. Desiring to lure the enemy into Silesia for a major battle, Frederick spread a rumor that he was retreating to Breslau. The Austrians, joined by the Saxons, fell for the lie and went on the offensive, but moved very slowly, which made it possible for Frederick to properly prepare his forces. It is worth noting that Frederick learned lessons after the successful Battle of Mollwitz, and in the gap between the wars, he did not sit idle. The obvious weakness of his army was the weak cavalry in comparison with the disciplined infantry, and the active training began. His hussars were no longer used as heavy cavalry. Instead, they had to act as light horse, conducting reconnaissance and acting more mobile. Also, tiresome training increased the rate of fire of his artillery. Frederick wanted to show everyone his new army. The Allies' army was allocated near the village of Hohenfriedberg. Frederick's army was based 2 hours away. He ordered his soldiers to light fires and pitch tents, thereby deceiving the Austrian scouts. And on June 4th, after a night march, his army attacked the unsuspecting Austrians, who set up camp in a long line along the river. Due to the difficult terrain, the Prussians could not build their battle line. Without waiting for the approach of all their forces, Frederick immediately ordered his cavalry to capture the elevations. The battle began somewhat confusingly because in the darkness his cavalry unexpectedly stumbled upon the Saxon units that were met by artillery fire. The noise of artillery fire alerted the main forces about the approach of the Prussian army. Austrians quickly began to deploy their troops, but they did not have time to help their units on the elevations, which were thrown back. The Prussian cavalry bypassed the hills and attacked the Saxon camp. They prevailed over the unprepared Saxons. At this time, Frederick completed the construction of an impromptu battle line in the center and ordered the main parts of Austrians to be attacked. By 7 o'clock in the morning, the thinning Saxon line began to retreat. The Austrians had a chance to successfully attack with cavalry and go behind enemy lines. But Charles of Lorraine, having heard about the defeat of Saxons, hesitated. He gave the order late, just at the moment when additional Prussian forces arrived. At 8:15, the dragons in the center broke into the Austrian lines. Within only 20 minutes, they captured 2,500 prisoners, 67 flags and standards, as well as 5 cannons. With what they put the last nail in the lid of the Austrian coffin. By 9 a.m., Charles ordered his units to retreat. It was an incredible victory for Prussia as a result of Frederick's skillful preparations of the battle. After this battle, he incessantly kept praising his cavalry. But unfortunately, Frederick couldn't continue the offensive. The Austrians quickly made up for their losses, so he was forced to return to Silesia and set up his army in winter quarters. In winter, the Allies planned to attack Berlin, but Frederick heard about it in time and defeated the Saxons at Kesselsdorf. That hastened the beginning of peace talks, and on December 25, 1745, the Treaty of Dresden concluded that ended the Second Silesian War. Silesia remained as part of Prussia, and Frederick recognized Francis I as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Thus peace was restored on the German territory, but in the northern Italy and in the Austrian Netherlands, the war continued between Austria, Great Britain, the United Provinces and Sardinia on one hand, and France and Spain on the other. On July 1745, the pretender of English throne, Charles Edward of House of Stuart, landed in Scotland that rise up on his behalf, but this plan ended very sadly due to his defeat at Culloden, which by the way was the last major battle of the British Isles. 1746. Everything doesn't look good for France. Fears forced them to retreat from northern Italy. In the same year, King Philip V died in Spain. His son, Ferdinand VI, became the new monarch who wanted to pull out Spain from the ravaging war and break off relations with the French. In 1747, in order not to suffer a complete defeat, the French launched an attack in the Austrian Netherlands. But in June of the same year, Russia finally takes the side of Austria, and the Russian auxiliary troops moved through Germany to the Rhine, that finally forced France to seek peace. And in 1748, a congress was opened in Aachen, where a peace treaty was signed that ended the war for the Austrian succession. Everywhere the same order of land ownership was restored that existed before the war, with the exception of Austria. Maria Theresa was amazed when she learned that in addition to the cession of Silesia to Prussia, She was also forced to cede the Duchy of Parma to Philip of Spain. Part of Duchy of Milan was ceded to Sardinia, but at the same time, all powers confirmed the Pragmatic Sanction, and Louis XV confirmed the right to the British throne with the Hanover dynasty, thus refusing to support the Jacobites. However, almost all participants in the war were dissatisfied with its result. After the war, too many unresolved issues were left. That will soon become the cause of a new major conflict.